So what does that mean? Here's a resource audit. Like, what does it really take to do our work? Second, how are people or the communities that I'm involved with really involved with this work? And by the way, while you're asking that, and this is important for every single one of us, it's also important to ask, wow, when I look at this, is my work actually that relevant? It might be passionate for me. I might feel really excited about it. It might be the best way Susan feels present in the world, like this is what I believe in. But in a collective sense, looking at those circles, we should all, each one of us, always be asking, and is it relevant to anybody other than me and the people who know me really well? Because we're talking about resources. And the one place I'm deeply conservative is relationship to resources. There's nothing that PFund has or uses that we have or use that is not something that somebody else can't use. So our organizations are using resources that other organizations don't have access to. So asking that question is a deeply responsible question. So resources, resource audit, community audit, and then you start to put them together. And putting together, and we can talk more, and this is the place where it's easier to get into direct questions, because otherwise it stays at like 15,000 feet. But putting them together asks for one more piece. So the 501c3 is really set up to make sure that a board of directors has legal and fiscal responsibility over the work, right? And then there's a system where the responsibility for making decisions often rests with the director, whatever you call the director. And because these are tight times, there's a lot that's placed on those bodies to make sure things work out. And when there's a lot that's placed on me to make sure things work out, if you suddenly come up to me and say, yeah, that idea didn't work so well, I want you to do something different, if I have a good day, I can hear you. If I'm feeling really stressed and scared, I might tell you to fuck off. You know, because that's also what happens under stress, right? And say that?
I said you do,
I
too.
do. Like I said, the quiet bodies are how they grew up. And so the reason I'm saying that is that ego. You know, it's like we started with what do you know about money and what do you know about yourself? Is that the work that we're starting to do at PFund is to do work with donor groups that's about our relationship to money. It's about the shit that we're carrying inside and the glory we're staying inside. And when I say ego, it means not having full sense of ownership over the work, but beginning to open it up a little bit. So I've been talking too much, and I'm going to question, but also...
I want to be the practical gremlin.
Please.
Because one of the things that we've had a great time over the years thinking about this, theorizing it, and I want to hear from you guys about, so like, what does this actually look like? So we got the audits, okay?
Right.
So, well, yeah, let's talk about that. Kate.
Do you want me to talk about
One of my goals is to, whatever, yeah.
Well, actually, I'd like, can I change the question?
You can do anything you want, Kate. I love it.
So I would like to ask, again, I'd like to ask this group of folks, because you are all here, because presumably you are trying different things, and some of them are working and some of them aren't. So besides going out on donor asks, besides writing grants, what are you trying that has some aspect of this, that has some piece of thinking about resources beyond cash, or doing some kind of resource sharing, or trying to transform it to doing something different?
So one of the things, you know, as I said, we've been thinking a lot about this at Headwaters, and one of the things we started having the conversations with is, how do we get into a different relationship? How do we have a deeper, more intentional relationship that's really about both being in a learning space and in a giving space? And so we created the Social Justice Leadership Institute about 6 or 9 months ago. We're in our pilot year, and it's a group of they're younger than me, so it's young people. Young people who are actually in this learning space and gathering resources together and giving them out together towards social movements. So it was one way that we were like, yeah, we just got to start doing it, because you only make the road by walking, so we're just going to start running.
So there's an organization called Generation 5, that talks about how it's going to take 5 generations to completely do away with child sexual abuse. And they've made a commitment to spend the next 5 generations working to the place where this is eradicated. And one of the things I've learned from them is they talk about when something is that huge and pervasive, that there's a way to end it. You just have to say you're going to do this for the next 5 generations and not be afraid to think like that. So at PFund, Kate and I went in with great big eyes around doing resource redistribution work and started talking with folks right away about community and about sharing resources, and learned pretty quickly that it's like there's some folks where that's really their language about the work, and there's other folks where that's not the language about the work. You know, we're a community foundation of the LGBT community in the upper Midwest, and there are as many different ways to be LGBT as there is anything else, and as many different relationships to money and economies as anything else. And so it made us pause and say, okay, so right now what we're doing is we're doing alignment work. Alignment work is being willing to have the conversation with everybody about money and resources and social justice and movement building. And some of those conversations are really easy and right there, and we all have shared language. Some of them we don't have shared language at all. And I bring that up because often in the realm of fundraising, when we talked about how fundraising for larger orgs is over here, and then the other work is over here, we all lie once fundraising happens. Lying happens a lot. Being careful. Thinking about how you're going to say what the work that you're doing differently in this room. And I use lie as an act of love and defense, not as a judgment word. Let me be clear about that. Okay?
And we all lie around money just generally.
And we lie in money.
I mean, it's not just
in our
fundraising,
lives, in
right?
the world. Absolutely.
I lie to myself about money all the time.
Exactly. And lying comes from someplace. Somewhere there's some belief system that in order to be okay and to get all those things met, there's some things you can't tell is fully the truth. And not I do think everybody who has been born and raised in the U.S. tells some amount of untruth about money. Whether we always are cognizant of it fully or not is another issue. But so we came in and we thought, okay, shifting towards resource redistribution, shifting away from fundraising, takes time. So the first stage is alignment. Like, we have to notice, what are we telling everybody? And then within there, some of the work that we're doing is we're starting to create, and again, we also learned from Headwaters a lot here, is that we're at a community foundation. As a community foundation, our role is to make sure that money is available for small grassroots organizations so that they can do the work that they want to do. That's what we are. We collect money from the community and redirect it to other parts of the community. So we have got to be straight up about money. And within there, we started to look and see, well, really, in so many ways, this should be quite simple, right? As children, we learn how to share, don't we? It's pretty easy. It seems simplistic, but there gets blocks. So we're just starting to create some things that are just, again, about straight up ways to talk about money. And I bring that up because we're going to now talk, more practical stuff, because without that, all of the ideas that we have are going to really be missing something pretty powerful. As long as within our work we can't find a way to talk about the resources and the money fairly straightforward and to be thoughtful about what gets in the way, it's going to impact all the things that we're creating.
Do you think, this is a I have absolutely no idea, do you think fundraising competition gets in the way at all of creating community partnerships?
Say it again, sorry.
Do you think fundraising competition gets in the way of kind of creating community partnerships, whether it's foundation to foundation, and is there a way to overcome that?
Yes.
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 First, yes.
Yes.
Both
Yes.
yeses. Three yeses. There's
Yes.
3 yeses.
And I think that is part of the piece about being able to be straight up about resources, right? So I think the piece that Susan's talking about lying or not talking about money, it happens with organizations, right? So to be fair, I used to be a development director. So just that's part of the baggage that I come into the room with, is that I used to.
You're now glorified development
Now I'm a glorified development director. I still spend all my time asking for money. And we would be all of these organizations that are working on similar issues, right? I worked around youth work and youth homelessness. We'd all be working on the same issues. We knew we needed all of us. But you still got to go in for these grants and say, this is how we're unique and different. And if you're going to fund one homeless youth serving organization, it should be us, right? So there's this challenge around competition for resources instead of looking at, and part of the hard thing is, and one of the paradoxes about this is that sometimes there aren't enough resources to go around. A lot of the time, we're scared that there aren't enough resources to go around, and so our survival mechanisms kick in, but also a lot of the time there aren't enough resources to do all the work that we need to do. So the structure that we have set up, and that's part of what I think is part of the problem with, we set up this nonprofit structure with this idea that, and in many ways it's a helpful tool, but also we set it up to be sort of an alternate system. But all of this stuff that we've been kind of patterning nonprofits after businesses in so many ways, right? You got to differentiate yourself and brand yourself, and you got to use your business model. And in a lot of ways, that's a really competitive system, right? And so it sets us up to compete for resources. So I think two things that are really critical to being able to do more honest resource sharing and resource conversations is folks with wealth need to be talking about resources, and folks who feel like they don't have any access to resources, who have very limited access to resources, and who haven't had the resource necessarily of learning about money, of learning about money beyond how to survive, right? Of conversations about you can ask for money, you can have conversations about money. Both those sides, we need to be having straight up conversations about money. So there are organizations that PFund is working with who are really working on, you know, we may not know how to go into, I may not know how to use 3 different salad forks, but I know how to hustle. And I know how to get what I need in order to get X, Y, or Z done. And that's a fundraising skill. You know, like that's not just an organization and social change skill, that's a fundraising skill. And on the other side, you know, there's an organization called Resource Generation that is talking with young people with wealth, talking about, I have all this money, or I have access to money, but it's never been talked about, right? And I don't know how to give it away in a way that works. I don't know what to do with it. I want to make change with it, but I don't know how. So the resource of having conversations about money openly and honestly, and then being able to have conversations about how we want to use it, is another piece of the resource sharing puzzle. I think that's really important.
And then I want to disagree with Kate a little bit because I think part of this about this competition thing is part of the mental shift that I've been thinking a lot because, okay, so first I've been working now in the nonprofit industrial complex for 25 years. I know I don't look 25, but really, I know it's 25 years. In one way or other, and I'm actually moving toward the trajectory of whatever that fundraising world looks like, more so than the program, and happy about it. Because I found a way that this is really about life-giving when we teach people, again, the simple skills about sharing, which is about giving and receiving. Something that we've been missing in our society is how to give and how to receive in a real way. And so I want to be the practical gremlin again, because I feel like we're having this conversation up there again. So what are some practical ways that you guys have been able to help people to understand either their relationship differently, the give and receive differently, the work differently, whatever it is, in the next few minutes with folks here?
All change happens through relationships. So what I can say is most of it has been through one-on-one conversations, and that's why the pace is slow. Is that one of the reasons why it gets hard to go from 15,000 feet to ground with this is that there is not a one-size-fits-all template. It's based upon your work, the community that you're a part of, and the relationships you're in. That's how it's going to emerge. That's whatever your next step is that emerges. At PFund, what I can tell you is we've been having it's one-on-one conversation. And we talk about healing work. We talk about inspiring giving and radicalizing receiving and supporting receiving as being essential. It has been about having straight up conversations about money where before the conversation was code. The code was fundraising, the code was issues, the code was programs, the code was a lot of things. And in there it's been about finding people's stories about money, why they're there, why they're connected. I mean, that's always where it starts. And then within there, asking really straight up questions. So there's been there's been groups of people who come to us who've been saying, I want to start an organization. Should I be a 501c3? And we've been like, what do you want to do? In the course of the conversation, don't be a 501c3. You don't have to. There's other ways to look at your work. So even how do you start? And then with larger organizations that are thinking about fundraising, again, it starts in that beginning place. Who are you? What's your work? Who's your community? Are you certain it's relevant? Are you certain it's relevant? And by that, what it means is there a community that wants to get around behind you? Like, do you know that? If you don't, then why are you doing the work? You know, and again, I say that carefully because there's also work that sometimes is radical and cutting edge, and we learn that we need it because it happens, so I recognize that as well. But if you're talking about community resources, then there's a question about, is it going to be impactful? And so the easiest way to answer that is to sit down one-on-one with all the different folks in here and to be like, what is it precisely? Like, what's the mechanics? What's the politics? What's happening there? And that's how it's ending up happening. And the reason we, and as I said, it's been a whole bunch of time with alignment, because some of this is about shared language, right? Right now, we're tossing out all kinds of words as though we all have the same use of that language, and we don't. We don't know each other in the room really well. Some of us know each other well. And I'm aware we're trading in shorthand. Is that the first thing is to be able to come up with alignment around language. And the reason I keep saying, and we're doing some of this work towards support around thinking about money, that's for folks across wealth, across experience of having, in order to allow that conversation to come much deeper. Because, and so that's like the practical, that's the way it's happening. And then before we came to PFund, we did work with different, I think separately, we did work with different organizations around the resource mapping and community mapping. We're super excited to bring that into the Community Foundation, and we're learning how to do that, and how does it make sense? Because we're building a relationship. We've been in this job for just a year, so we're building a relationship with the community. We can't come in and say, we have these ideas, and we're going to make a change. That's why I talked about alignment and relationship. It is slow, intentional work.
Can I?
Yeah.
So I think a couple of, because I really hear you about, I'm your concrete girl. I always want to go to the concrete.
I know that.
Like the asphalt. A couple of, where it seems like it's working the best for us right now is specifically around skills. When we're talking about resource sharing, it's specifically around skills that we would have otherwise had to pay for that we don't have to pay for anymore.
Yeah.
So PFund needed some help with communications. We talked around the idea of hiring someone to help us with some of our communications, and instead what we were able to do was find through our resource networks someone who was really good with Facebook and Twitter and all of that stuff that I know I'm 30, I'm supposed to be able to be good at, but I suck at. And so she's going to come in and do that for us, right? That's an extra resource that she had. She has enough time and she has that skill, and so she's going to come in and help us do that, and so we don't have to spend money on a communications person. There are places where we're looking at, like, we do need to raise cash, and so what can we trade in order to raise that cash? So Susan and I were talking today about, there's some work that some folks are really hungry for doing around body-based trauma, cash, money, all of this stuff we're talking about. But in order for us to be able to do that work, we need some money in order to be able to put it into PFund's budget. So talking about, okay, let's take a Saturday. Let's say, this is open to 25 people, sliding scale, $25 to $75. We're going to do this. We're going to spend time creating it, and then the money goes into PFund's pot because we need to raise the cash. But this is a conversation that folks are really wanting to have. So at the moment, it's really around the level of, like, what are skills that we can trade for? Where are there places where people have a little bit of time and they can help us with something that we would have to pay for otherwise? That's the concrete place where I think we've gotten the best at it.
I just thought of one that I can offer up too. And so one of the things that we've been recognizing is this idea of competition. That is a foundation, that's the other sort of thing, is that we are the creators of that competition. We're not the creators, but we're the maintainers of that in a big, bad way. And so one of the conversations that we've been having a lot is, how do we enter into partnerships with organizations, and what does that look like? And how do we honestly broker relationships when there's a power imbalance? And that's a real deal. And so part of it is for them, so our little solution to that is to being into long-term relationships with them, and knowing that for the work of where they're partnering, that we're going to partner with them to kind of create these larger coalitions, and just being in it that way. And recognizing that we have to lead. If we want people to change, we have to actually lead, and we have to give up some of our power. So that means giving up money and giving up decision making, which is things foundations loathe to do, let me tell you. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, we're exploring different kinds of earned income stuff. The example that Kate just gave is that's what we're thinking. We're like, what are the different skill sets of folks who are involved or in the community who really want to find ways, to be involved in a community foundation, giving dollars through what are different earned income strategies. So that's exactly where that conversation came out of.
And I think there's a lot of ways that anything that diversifies where an organization gets its resources from, right, can be really helpful so that you're not yanked, so that you don't have one big resource stream that you can be yanked by, right? The flip side of it, of course, is when you're thinking about earned income, again, always when money is coming from somewhere, you become accountable in some way to those folks, right? You start to make decisions around wanting to maintain that funding stream. So I think in any kind of new, looking at getting funding from a different space or evaluating where you're getting it from now, thinking about, are these folks I want to be accountable to? And is this a way in which I want to be accountable? So that when I'm thinking about doing something really risky with my organization or taking a stand on something, is this the group of people that I want to be calling to complain or holding me to task, right? Which is the challenging thing. But I think, earned income and diversifying revenue is, and now I'm getting nerdy in finance committee. Diversifying revenue is very important. But it is.
So you start from where you are, and where we are has also changed. And the work of, this great big question about how do we shift so that our work is actually funded or resourced in a way that is intentional and has integrity with our values and is connected with the communities that we're a part of, and however each of us frames the question, is long and slow work. And I think it's one of the things that makes it hard for a conversation and a presentation, is that to do it is that we have to start from exactly where we are, from the communities that we're a part of, from the scale that we imagine the change has to take, from the speed we need it to take for our survival, and from who we already know and what we know now. And so based on that, the answer to it is going to be completely different. The reason we started with so much context is that the scale is that big. What it means to shift fundraising, so it's about resource gathering and resource interdependence and community interdependence, so it's about building towards something, is as big as this fumbly conversation can be. What's exciting for us is it's absolutely a commitment to be thinking through it. Part of us imagining a community foundation, and one of the reasons we wanted to come to PFund, is that community foundations have as their roots being community resource referral networks. So basically there were formalized ways in which communities shared resources. We have a lot of curiosity about what it means to get closer to that in a way that doesn't lose the scale, but maintains the integrity of the relationships. And we don't know far more than we know. And so any opportunity to continue learning, including with you either now and afterwards or forward, is going to be huge. And when you say other sticky things, I can say, for me, this is like it. This, to me, is part of what the work is going forward, without any sense of where it's going to end. After that, any conversation would be lovely. There's still a lot of learning. And thank you for coming. And again, I'm sorry that there wasn't nearly enough time to also gather from the wisdom in this room, because I know there's a lot. So for that, thank you.